glaube, das müsste gehen. Wir sind ja nicht so viele. Das sind ja nur wir, die in dem Raum sind.
Irgendwer hat da Hintergrundgeräusche. Ich weiß nicht genau, wer das ist.
Jürgen?
Yes.
Salome is joining in a minute, so it's okay. She's just going to the office.
Okay. Leon, can you hear me? Are we online now? Okay, then we can start this session. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the BMZ GIZ session at Tropentag 2020, my name is Jürgen Anthofer. I'm with the Advisory Service on Agricultural Research for Development. The German abbreviation for that is BEAF. This is a project running under GIZ. And we are managing the funds of BMZ in support of international agricultural research. That means to support the 15 CGIAR centers, plus ECP, plus the World Vegetable Center. I give you a very brief overview what we are doing here, and also an information about something which just popped up quite recently. There will be an alarm at 11 a.m. That is about in 1 hour from now. So you might hear some noise in the background, but don't worry, it's just a test. Okay, we can proceed now. The topic of our session is called BMZ Strategy, Funding Instruments and Supported Research Projects in Response to Global Crisis. So you can see that we aligned also our topic to the overall motto of this year's Tropentag. And when we talk about global crisis, everybody, of course, thinks at the moment about COVID-19. We will hear also something about the COVID-19 pandemic and how that affected the work in agricultural research. But we should also not forget there are also other crises around, and they have not disappeared. First of all, of course, the climate crisis, which we need still to address. And then there's also a refugee crisis. And a lot of people in Europe, they think about refugees when refugees are entering Europe. But of course, it had some root causes somewhere else. And we have also an example addressing this kind of crisis. So having said that, we will start now pretty quickly. After each presentation, we will allow a couple of questions, and we hope we get some answers. Yeah, we still have to stick very much to the time frame. So I will start now with Sebastian Lesch. He's the head of Division 121, International Policy, Agriculture and Innovation of BMZ, the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. And he will give us a little bit the broader, a bigger picture from the ministry perspective. And we'll start with that. Good morning, Sebastian Lesch. The floor is yours.
Hello, good morning. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be with you in the framework of this Tropentag in a little bit of a different format than usual. Obviously, I would have loved to see you all in person, but this is also a very good way of exchange, and we've gotten used to it, even so much that my voice is leaving me a little from all the video conferences and all the virtual panels I've been on. So excuse me in that a little bit. I'll try and be brief. I'll tell you a little bit about the crisis response that we've had at the ministry in terms of COVID-19, and I'll try and tell you a little bit about how we see that this affects international agricultural research and about the building back better that we're looking at. And I'll try also and tell you a little bit about 1CGR and the strategy that the Systems Council and the donor community has put behind this. And I'm, of course, I'll try to keep it brief, and I'll be open to any questions from the audience that you might have for me. In terms of the crisis response, obviously, this is a pandemic that hits the whole world, but developing countries have been affected disproportionately. This has been perceived in Germany very much as a health crisis in the very beginning, and it's been the job of my ministry and my minister to make it very clear that this is not a health crisis alone, but that this is a crisis with multiple dimensions. Most of all, it's also a food security crisis. So he has dubbed this also a hunger pandemic, and I think that is a very good signature line to make it clear that the health aspect that is very much in the foreground in the discussion, for example, in Europe and in North America, is just one of many aspects for many people dealing with this crisis. We have been reacting in restructuring our budget very much. We've had a surplus additional budget of 3 billion euros for 2020 and 2021. Plus, we've restructured about 1 billion euro within our already existing budget. So that is quite a lot. We've shifted quite a lot. This is a very substantial crisis response. We've identified 7 dimensions that we're talking about. We're talking about health and pandemic control, obviously. We're talking about food security, and I would like to say obviously as well. We also have a pillar for the stabilization of fragile regions that are affected. We have a social protection pillar, securing jobs. We have an economic support pillar in many industries in developing countries that have been affected, from textiles to tourism. We have a government liquidity pillar, and we have a cooperation pillar, sort of an overall pillar. In those 7 priority areas, we have invested those 1 + 3 billion euros. One of those is food security. In that food security pillars, we are able to provide 200 million out of restructuring of the ongoing program, and 600 million euros out of additional funds that we have received in 2020 and that we will be receiving in 2021. So quite a lot of money. What are we doing with that money? We're looking to partners that we are already cooperating with and trying to really react to the situation on the ground. Because what's important to see is, I think, in this pandemic, as in most development situations, there is no one size fits all, but there are situations on the ground that are very different. In terms of the COVID-19 crisis, there are places where there are severe lockdowns that are affecting agricultural production very much, that are affecting economic performance overall very much. There are places where this is not so much. There are places where the health issue is in the foreground. There are places where other issues are in the foreground. There are places where multiple crises hit. And Mr. Antover, you've mentioned a couple. There is, of course, the climate crisis that is still there. That is, for many people, just as important as COVID-19 is, if not more important. There is still a locust crisis going on, in particular in the east of Africa, that we shouldn't be overlooking, that is affecting agricultural production and livelihoods very much. There is a refugee situation in many places that has not really changed. There is still crisis and conflict situations going on in many places. So there are multiple crises, and each and every place is different. So we're trying to react in ways that are adapted to each and every place by bringing in those people on the ground. We are happy that still the embassies are working. We have the GSZ projects that are mostly on the ground and up and running. So we have ears and eyes on the ground that can tell us, in collaboration with local partners, what the situation is. And we're trying to bring that to the table and react to those structures. We have multilateral structures that we're reacting through. World Food Programme is an obvious choice. UNICEF is an obvious choice. And we have the things that we're doing bilateral with the partners of our own. For example, through the Green Innovation Centers that have their feelers in 15 countries and that can really talk very directly to their partners and support them very directly. In the day-to-day work that we're doing, this goes very much down into the little nitty-gritty detail. There are agricultural inputs missing here. There's personal protective equipment missing there. So if you are in close contact with your partners, you will be made known those things, and we're trying to react best as possible. This is a very dynamic situation. I'm pretty sure that whereas in Germany the situation is more sort of lean back, the worst is behind us. Now this is about getting back on track. This is about testing how we can live with that virus. That's probably not the case in most of Africa and in most other parts of the world, where this is still a dynamic situation where we have not seen the end of it, in particular in terms of what that means for the food security situation. So that much maybe in terms of the crisis response, the immediate crisis response. If there are any questions, please let me know. In terms of what that means for international agricultural research, I'm trying to take the lead there by saying it's important to make the very strong argument that this crisis cannot be used to justify that, well, all the things that we've been talking about, resilience and climate change and the greener economy, that's all additional stuff. Now we're really hitting rock bottom. So now this is about getting back to basics, getting things moving, getting production up. That would be a huge mistake. In every crisis, there needs to be a chance, there needs to be an opportunity. And there are opportunities in this crisis that we need to salvage. And the World Bank, that usually has a good hand for good slogans, has dubbed this building back better. I've heard that they have now redubbed this building forward better to make it clear that this is not about going back. So let's call it building forward better. That means we have to make sure that, first of all, the things that we've been discovering, that we've been leapfrogging in during the crisis, that we make use of them permanently. Digitalization is a very clear thing. The thing that we're doing now, we would not have been doing a year ago. We wouldn't have been dreaming about it, although technically it would have been possible. Digitalization makes new means of communication possible, new contacts possible, new ways to approach targets group possible. That we need to really harvest and work more about. That's the one thing. And then building forward better also means that we not only do we let go of our aims, but we pursue those aims that I've mentioned even more strongly. Shorter supply chains, more value added in place, more resilience in agricultural production, a greener economy, all those strategies that are there, in particular on the European level. Think of the European Green Deal, think of the farm to fork strategy for the European market that has huge implications also for international agricultural trade. These things we need to push further, we need to keep in mind, we need to make sure that they are still pursued and pursued even more fervently. And in that, I think, international agricultural research has a huge role. We have used the CG Center for our immediate response, because in many ways we have very close ties to the centers that are on the ground. I can give you the example of Africa Rice, that we've been working together with the Green Innovation Center to provide, for example, seed to ensure regional food security and other things. We've done that in multiple centers. But also on a more general level, in terms of the 1CG reform that we are pursuing. I'll try to tell you a little bit about that as well. The discussion has been going on since 2018, and in November 2019, in the Systems Council in Chengdu, I'm part of the Systems Council of the CGIR. We have, as the donor community, asked the system to put in place certain reforms. Those reforms have a number of aspects that have been highly debated. One aspect is that we will have an executive management team that will be managing the CG system as a system, or a level atop of the GDs of the individual institutes. One thing is that we will have a system common board, so that there will be no individual boards for the individuals, but there will be one set of persona on those boards. Those are things that have led to a huge amount of discussion because they're related to personnel, they're related to such strategic decisions. So that's important from my point of view. But the most important thing that I really want to stress and really want to highlight today is what we want to achieve is gear the CG system more towards research for development, outcomes, concrete outcomes for development. Try to find a means of setting research goals that are in between very general things, like we need to contribute to saving the climate, we need to contribute to fighting the pandemic. That's all fine, that's all true, but that's not a research goal in itself. On the other hand, you have the more nitty-gritty details, like breeding of this crop, researching of this particular thing. We need to find something that is in between, and that is what we've called in the Systems Council the big lifts. These are in the process of being defined, and I think you're all invited really to contribute to that discussion. That is not a discussion that the executive management team will have by itself and will sort of indoctrinate on the system, but this is something that will come out of the system. We need to define those big lifts in order to keep the CG system relevant for the future. I have to answer lots of questions on international agricultural research because we're putting a lot of money in it. We've been putting 20 million euros a year into it for many years. We've topped this up this year for the first time. We're now putting 35 million euros into the CG system. So that is a lot of money. So we have, as donors, and I know my colleagues feel the same, we have to justify. What do we get out of this? And as a donor, saying, well, we get a new sort of maize out of it, I know that this is a very important thing. But this is not enough to convince people that we need this. We need to make the system relevant and show that relevance. And this is what 1CG, for me, is all about. And that will make 1CG more attractive for development partners as well, more relevant in the international discussion around SDG 2 that is going on, and that the CG system should be an integral part of. So I think I will stop there. I think there's a lot of room for discussion. Please feel free.
Yeah, thank you very much, Sebastian Lesch. I think it was very interesting also for the audience to see the various responses to also various types of crisis. Also interesting to see how much money BMZ is taking and allocating for these different dimensions. Also the BMZ position to the 1CGIR reform process. And I'm sure there will be quite a number of questions. And my colleague Hannah in the background, she is looking a bit through the questions, and we will select a few of them. Hannah?
Yeah, I've also turned on my camera. Hello and good morning to everyone. So I see two questions in the WOVA chat room that I would like to address. So firstly, people become refugees due to violent crisis and/or environmental disasters. Do you differentiate between these groups in your programs?
I think the simple answer is no, we don't. I mean, you have to, of course, see differently that there is a European discussion on the refugee crisis, on asylum, on Moria that is burning. That discussion has been going on since 2015. That's not my discussion. That is an interior policy discussion of the European Union that is very, very hot. That is a different thing. And legally, of course, there are distinctions between different categories of reasons for refugees, for migrants. There are very important distinctions. But in terms of development cooperation, I don't think it's the important distinction why somebody is not where they were before. But we have to look at what does the migrant bring to that new place? That is very often a positive thing. What can a migrant bring back to another place or to his home place that he might be going back to look at circular migration? Of course, we have to look at the causes of migration. This is a very, very complex thing. The main distinction in that complex thing is not the reason why somebody has left. This is, of course, part of the analysis. If you want to combat those causes, you need to look at them very, very closely. And in fact, very rarely, if you look at African internal migration, very rarely this is a monocausal thing where we say, well, here there's a conflict here, so somebody went from place A to B. There is usually a multitude of reasons behind that, usually including climate change. So that's what we've been looking at.
Okay, yeah, thank you. A second question, do you think in the long run, more resources will be made available for agricultural research for development? Will the pandemic be a turning point?
This is partly a technical, partly a philosophical question. If you look at the budget for international agricultural research, I've tried to explain that there is a certain expectation from the donor community towards the system. We've been talking about what we are trying to get out of the system in the Systems Council sessions very, very much in detail. This is not, this 1CG thing is not something that anybody is taking lightly. This is not a public relations stunt. This is not a rebranding of something. This is the result of in-depth discussions in the Systems Council, which comprises the major donors to the International Agricultural Research System, in terms of how can we make the system deliver what we need in the future. Because the question of whether we put more money into that or not will depend on whether those people who give the money perceive that they're getting something valuable out of this. And if you look at who's giving the money, yes, that is, in the first place, it's my ministry, it's my division who gives the money, but it doesn't grow on trees. We are giving this money from the German parliament. So my job is to convince the German parliament why, of all the money that is there in the German national budget, this is something that we should be supporting and that we should be topping up. We've been quite successful with that. We've topped up from 20 to 35 million this year for the first time. We hope to be doing that again, to stay on that in that higher mark. But I've made it quite clear in the Systems Council that this, of course, depends on whether the system is able to deliver on one CG, or whether there are institutes or the system as a whole that sort of refuses to develop. I think this has to be made quite clear. There is an expectation from the donor community that this moves forward, and that's not for me alone. I mean, I know from the discussions that we've been having that I share that with the colleagues on the Systems Council. Note that the 1CG decisions on the council have been anonymous, all of them. This is not something that's been pushed by a few, but this is important. The one determines the other. We have sort of front-loaded, and we've said yes, we'll go there already this year, go a bit further, go to 35 million to show our willingness, to show that we believe in that system, that we want to work with that system. And now it's up to the system to also deliver. I think there to make this positive point as well. I think the system is well en route in the right direction, and I think a lot has been achieved in a relatively short time frame. So I'm really very, very hopeful and very confident that this will lead to a good conclusion. There is, of course, agricultural research besides CGIAR as well. We do a lot of national agricultural research. There are other institutes, national institutes in many countries. This is a different question. In the end, that is the market, of course, in which the result comes. But what makes the CG unique is that this is an international system that produces international public goods. And I think that is a value that we should really cherish.
Maybe one last question, short one.
I would actually have one, if you mind.
Volkert, yeah, please.
Actually, I have two questions, and they're very short. The one is on the expectation side. I understand that there are expectations, but how the expectations are formulated, I find a little bit off the point, actually, because there is no promise to deliver anything. And if you actually want to fund research, then, for example, for the green revolution, you would have to fund research into gibberellic acid metabolism and into photoperiodism and nutrient uptake mechanisms of rice. Without funding this quite not so obvious development goals, you would have never got the IR8, so which actually is the father or the mother of the green revolution. So it cannot be just everything output oriented. That's not possible. If you do that, then you're running in the wrong direction. That's just a comment. My question is, how can we, as German players in this whole thing, university players particularly, how can we contribute? How can we participate in this discussion process? And also maybe help defining these kind of research topics that you were just mentioning, and maybe get this consumer view of the politicians a little bit out of the system.
Yeah, thank you. I would refuse to be dubbed a politician myself, but I'm just the lowly official who's sort of trying to make this work. And I don't think I'm in consumer mode really. I mean, in terms of no promise being made. Look, I think really with this topping up that we've been making from 20 to 35, that is quite substantial. So we've shown we are willing to go into this. This is not about us reducing commitment to the system. No, this is about us reinforcing commitment to the system, a system that I cherish very much. I've said this for what it's done in the past and for what it's capable of doing. So we've really done some front loading here. So no promises being made. Well, I can't make promises for the future. That's for sure. It's a little bit of a tit for tat as well. So something moves here, something needs to move there. for sure. But I feel from the other colleagues in the Systems Council that they view this the same way. Now, the promise is not only to give more money, but also the promise is on how to give that money. Right now, what's happening in the CG system is very much that individual donors give money for individual purposes to individual centers. And this sort of leads to a lot of, a strange way of competition, if you want. What we would want to do is centralize this a little bit and increase incentives for donors to put money in the system, which also gives more space and freedom for the system to decide where the research goals ultimately should be. So I think that this reform can actually reduce dependence on this consumer mode a little bit if it helps to increase the pooled funding that is there. In terms of the contents of research that you've been managing, please do bring that into the discussion. I mean, I've not been saying that I want output-centered research. I've said that I want relevant research that is relevant for development. So we have to talk, obviously, about what is relevant. And basic research is also relevant if it is relevant for a development output in the end. So I'm not at all against that. This is really not about consumption. This is a process in the system, a discussion in the system. How can we be relevant? What is relevant? But that the system needs to be relevant, I think, is very hard to debate. How can we get in as a German university? This is a relatively open discussion process where many people are involved through the different boards in the system, through the executive management team, through the donor community. There is a systems management board as well. There is a scientific advisory committee that is advising the system on these reforms. But there are lots and lots of entry points into the system. One of them is me, so my door is open. If there's anything you would like me to transport into the system, there are many other doors. So this is meant to be an open discussion process in which this question of relevance can be openly discussed. This is explicitly not something where the Systems Council comes and asks a research question. That's not what the process is about, and I think that's not what the process should be about. That's not how we run universities in Germany, and that's for a reason.
Thank you very much. I think we have to stop here this very interesting discussion, but due to time constraints, we have to go forward. I think there will be more questions, and I think with the WOVA app, I think participants can raise additional questions. We come now directly to the next presentation by my colleague Steffen Entenmann. He's also in the BEAF team, together with Ulrich Lebel, who is heading another GIZ program. And there was a side event yesterday, a BEAF side event, and Steffen, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Actually, Jürgen, I take the micro and start with the presentation.
Okay, sorry.
Okay, I'm Ulrich Lebel. I'm heading a global program that is called PIAF, which is a fund to promote human capacity development with partners in international agricultural research. So for those who are not so familiar with this side of event called BEAF meeting, which has been held this week for the 15th session, and which is our traditional platform for exchange working experiences and findings from more than 30 SIM-integrated and returning experts that are working in 15 international agricultural research centers from the CGIAR++ community, currently in 25 countries. So the operating GIZ programs that are related to this event is the Fund for International Agricultural Research, operated by the BEAF team. It is the fund to promote HCD in the centers, which is headed by me, and the global program of migration and diaspora. So, as I mentioned, this was the 15th session, and the first time we held this virtually. And this leads me to give, in the preparation of the event, we asked the participant to answer a survey asking about the direct impacts of the pandemic to their working context and what would be the coping strategies for the work context. And here the little word cloud shows the summary of this a bit. So during the side event, we discussed also the question, what are the first lessons learned from the crisis and what could be new entry points for research for development approaches. And here come some findings. And with this, I hand over to Steffen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Uli. What you see here now is one of several mind maps that we drew to capture the outcomes of the workshop, and another mind map, for example, captured general impacts that were perceived by the integrated experts. And Sebastian Lesch already summarized very fittingly what the experts conceived. So it's good that our discussion or our presentation builds on what we have already discussed in the session before. So what I want to share here is a bit the different entry points that were conceived by the experts, and we have some solutions related to agronomy or agricultural production represented by the blue branch, and that includes relatively specific technical and social approaches to developed by the CGIAR and other partners. And they, for example, include the need to capture the specific requirements and preferences of different farmer groups in breeding programs. So-called product profiles account for these preferences, also in a, for example, in a gender disaggregated way. Then another solution suggested was, or entry point suggested was, were technical agroclimatic committees that represent a dialogue between researchers, public and private actors, but also farmers that seek to understand climatic behavior and try to come up with recommendations to reduce the risks implied by climate crisis. So you already see here that we also did not differentiate between the impacts of COVID-19 and climate crisis. Then there were other entry points mentioned, like mechanization approaches to compensate for labor shortages due to lockdowns or sickness, and also cooled storage facilities for farmers' produce that have been considered important to reduce post-harvest losses that come with dysfunctional local and export markets. So you see here the link between agronomic solutions and solutions that have a more broader focus on food systems and the socio-economic efforts. And this is the climate smart agriculture, which comprises specific technical approaches, but also bear this more system focus. And solutions related to broader socio-economic issues are represented here by this yellow branch, which is labeled food system. And here, already important points mentioned by Mr. Lesch are reflected here, that we need, of course, look beyond the farm gates and to have also focus on land rights, financing, a very important issue which could probably fill one or two individual sessions by their own. So I can only mention them. So there are various entry points. And one focus of our discussions were around digital solutions that is represented by this green branch here. Digital solutions were suggested for communication in general, but also data collection, which is of course important for the researchers, and extension. It is important to mention that all these technologies, of course, come with new challenges, and a very important pitfall is that the existing inequalities are being made even worse, especially with regards to, well, restricted access to digital solutions, connectivity, electricity, but also important to bear in mind that women's access to smartphones or other devices is generally restricted. We also found, of course, and that was literally mentioned also by Sebastian Lesch, that there is no one-fits-all response. And we tried to delve a little bit in more country-specific entry points. And here in this map, you see the locations where our integrated experts are placed. For Latin America, for example, it was found important to support the implementation of public emergency policies that are implemented now by various governments to ensure food security and support rural economies. And Uli, would you go ahead with the Asia-related approaches, please?
Yeah, certainly. In many Asian countries, we actually observe a new movement of back migration of labor forces from the cities back to the rural communities due to the lockdown in the cities and new challenges of living in metropolitan areas. So, for example, colleagues reported about private-driven collective initiatives to organize local food supply chains as, for example, door-to-door delivery of locally produced food using smartphone apps and social media networking. We heard of stories of jobless taxi drivers in Indonesia becoming vegetable traders providing door-to-door delivery or car boot sales. From India, we heard that IT engineers started organic vegetable production and delivery services when moving back to their families in rural sites. So we think these pandemic-driven local self-help initiatives can offer new opportunities to establish new long-term engagements in food systems and should be considered as a new type of target group to consider and to be included into our work tomorrow. Of course, suitable connectivity and communication infrastructure is a key precondition and for this trend and for empowering certain revitalization of the rural sector. Back to you.
For Africa, we had specific working group discussions that where we did not find so clear evidence for a reversed migration from urban areas to rural areas, as it has been the case, and it has been also documented for the Asian context. So we here still see migration to urban centers, and in order to prepare the conditions or to make rural areas ready to take up people from the cities, or if such a reversed migration should start to accommodate for these people, we need to clearly understand very basics of agricultural production. That includes secure access to land and other assets, which is still would have been conceived very, very problematic, especially for younger people. And also we had different findings with regards to digitalization in the African context, where communication, electricity, and markets are not as developed or not as broadly available as in the Asia context. For example, one specific entry point was suggested for outreach. For example, radio has been considered a very, very good solution to reach people, but not so much for extension. So here we should have a combination between different approaches, like digital approaches, which are accessible by some people, but also analog approaches like radio, which can be used to reach quite larger number of people. And with that snapshots from the different regions, I would give back once more to Uli for the final conclusions.
Yeah, please make it quick. Yeah.
Okay. So perhaps the core takeaways of this event are three statements. Age and gender are crucial aspects to adapt and adopt the food systems. Women and youth must be our key target groups, and the approaches in research should be gender transformative and youth responsive. Digital tools and technologies offer promising innovations, but we have to consider the digital gaps, the limited access, and the limited literacy of rural actors. And we have to include traditional and non-digital approaches for outreach and empowering. And finally, the research, and this is what Mr. Lesch already pronounced, needs to follow a more interdisciplinary and holistic approach, better corresponding to the social and environmental conditions of resource-poor households and their local economies. Food systems are not sustainable and were not sustainable before the pandemic, so they should not recover but rather transform. That was a final statement from the group. So thank you for listening, and back to you, Jürgen.
Thank you very much, Uli and Steffen. Very interesting also to hear about these regional differences and of this ZIMBER site event. We straight come, well, if you have further questions, I think you can do that directly in WOVA. We don't have the time now for that, and we will go straight to our next presentation by Volker Asch. He's a professor of the University of Hohenheim, and he's also board chair of Adserv, which is the Council for Tropical and Subtropical Agricultural Research. And I think he's wearing for this presentation the hat for Adserv, and he will talk about some support instruments of BMZ for early career scientists. Volker, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'm just trying to get my display. Can you see my presentation?
Not yet. Now it's coming.
Okay, I don't see anything here at the moment. What is happening? Okay, now you see my slides.
No, it's here, yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, so welcome. We'll try to keep it brief. I would like to introduce Sarah Glatzle, the coordinator of the Junior Scientist Program, who will talk about the Junior Scientist Program. And myself, as the head of Adserv, as you said, and also, of course, one important role is professor at the University of Hohenheim. Adserv and GIZ have started supporting early career scientists since a long time. Maybe you remember still the special projects of the GIZ 20 years ago or more. And now Adserv and GIZ are teaming together to help early career scientists to start the career. Who is Adserv? I would like to give you just a few words on it. Adserv is the German Council for Tropical and Subtropical Research. We are linking German development-oriented research players to the international development-oriented research players in the CG, for example. We are supporting early career scientists with our two programs, JSP and also the Adserv Academy we are going to talk about today, and also via the annual Tropentag conference, in which we are just participating at the moment. Adserv is bundling or bringing together experts on competence against poverty and hunger. And in this way, we are trying to address some of these SDGs with our members. We are providing a network hub and linking scientists and other stakeholders worldwide who are working in this field. So it's not just scientists, but also other people like journalists and technicians and whatever else is there in terms of disciplines linked out to this particular aspect. If you want to find out more about Adserv, and you're very welcome to become a member to support our goals, you should go to our website, which is given here, and you can easily find when you just Google Adserv. Okay, what are we doing today? Today we are going to talk about the Adserv CGIAR++ Junior Scientist Program. This is going to be Sarah, who's talking in a few minutes. And the second part will be the Academy for International Agricultural Research, the Adserv Academy, which I will introduce. So with this, I turn over to Sarah.
Hi, can everybody hear me? I think so.
Yes.
Perfect. Okay, next slide. Yeah, perfect. So in 2018, BEAF proposed to us, to Adserv, to take over their master research program. And Adserv did this and renamed it Adserv. Now something's not quite, I can't, yeah. Adserv CG IR++ Junior Scientists program. And the goal of the program is to financially support MSc students enrolled at German universities to conduct their research for their MSc thesis at one of the CG centers, and through this gain practical experience in project-based scientific work. Next slide. So the application procedure is as follows. TRIDEM, consisting of student, German university supervisor, and supervisor of the CG Center, jointly prepare a research concept that is part of a development-oriented project at the respective CG Center. And then the student applies to Adserv. The application has to include a letter of motivation, a CV, the before jointly prepared MSc research concept with about 3 to 4 pages, including a work plan, enrollment certificate to a German university, a letter of confirmation from the CG Center confirming to host and supervise the student at the respective CG Center, and a letter of confirmation from the German university supervisor confirming that they will accept and supervise the research concept as the MSc thesis, and also a letter of recommendation from one of the university lecturers. Next slide. There we go. So, and after the application has been accepted by the selection committee, a fee contract between Adserv and the student is issued, providing the student with a lump sum of 5,000 euros for travel costs and costs of living for the entire time they are at the CG Center. Two conditions are tied to the payment. A letter of agreement between Adserv and the CG Center has to be signed, and the student has to send confirmation of international health insurance and international liability insurance. And the stay at the CG Center should be for 6 months and is exclusively for research and not for thesis writing. And as everything and everybody, also the JSP program had to adapt to the COVID-19 situation. So during the corona pandemic, Adserv supports projects that work on already available data sets. These data sets have to be analyzed by the student as part of their MSc thesis, jointly supervised again by a German professor and a CG supervisor. These data sets should also be part of a development-oriented project of the respective CG Center. And for those types of collaborations, the presence of the student at a CG Center is not required, but also mixed forms of this, like a remote start at the beginning and later travel to the CG Center once the pandemic is over are possible. At the moment, we have no application deadlines, so we accept and process application at any time. So far, we had a pilot phase that was from August 2019 to April 2019. From August 2018 to April 2019, and then this time we supported 7 students. In total, we're quite mixed nationalities. We had 3 German, 1 from Benin, 1 Ghanaian, and 2 Nigerians. The involved CG centers were the ITTA, SIP, ICRISAT, and IMWI. And the country of assignment were 3 of them went to Ghana, 2 to India, 1 to Nigeria, and 1 to Peru. And the gender ratio was, we had 5 female students and 2 male students. Then we applied for a follow-up phase. In this phase 1, in this phase we are at the moment, that started in September last year and will last until February 2021. In this time, we would like to support 20 students. So far, we have 11 students, also very mixed backgrounds, 5 Germans, 1 British, 1 Uzbek, 1 Australian, 1 Peru, and 1 Brazilian. The involved CG centers are IRI, ICRAFT, IMWI, SIAD, ICADA, and CIMIT so far. Country of assignment, so two of the 11 already went to the countries and came back already. Vietnam and Kenya, and 9 of them, because of the corona pandemic, of course, are remotely supervised at the moment. And the gender ratio so far, 6 females, 5 males. And in June of this year, we applied for the second phase. That should start in October and should last until February 2002. That's me.
Yes. So thank you, Sarah, for introducing the JSP to us. If there are any questions, they can be answered later. What we are doing with this program is that we are supporting young career scientists who want to work in development-oriented research and agricultural research, and we link them early on in their career with the CG systems, and particularly also with our CG network. The CG network is something which is we are maintaining on a personal basis with our colleagues, and of course also with many of the German contributors in the CG system and the BMZ and these programs that were directly financing these centers. These 1.2 million programs particularly help us maintain this kind of research network and help us also placing our young career scientists then in the systems. And one of the problems was always that what happens after somebody did the master thesis and then is on the market? So how do we get these people into research? And the Academy for International Agricultural Research was then perceived as an idea, particularly because young German scientists were less and less involved in international agricultural research. There were times when we had a hard time finding any German scientists in important positions in the CG. That is, of course, also a cycle. People come and go, but it was lamented also by leading scientists in the CG that they have difficulties to recruit high-level scientists, particularly from Germany. There were many reasons for this, but there were also, one thing was clear, that very often young scientists were not really linked to the CG early in their careers, and therefore it was difficult to actually develop them in a CG-oriented professional field. So the idea was, why not pick up these masters that we have and then bring them into a PhD program? And so the idea was to build up an Academy for International Agricultural Research, train about 100 PhD students in international agricultural research, and in the course of 13 years, they do their thesis research in the centers and mutually supervised with German university partners and CG partners. They receive a method-oriented training, and they have a research grant to contribute to research activities that are already ongoing in the CG system, either as CRP or as a bilateral program in one of the CG centers. This way, we are hoping to develop career opportunities for at least 25 of these 100 in collaboration with CG centers and donors. Something like, for example, the GIZ ZIM expert program. And this way, we could strengthen the link between German universities and international agricultural centers. The idea was to have a structure like this: university and CG center join together, propose a research topic, and find a PhD candidate who wants to do that kind of research. These three units, university, CG center, and PhD candidate, apply for the research grant in the Adserv Academy, formerly known as GSIAR. That was the original name of it. And then the Adserv Academy would link the two university and CG centers in training this candidate, so and develop the career opportunities. We had a lot of problems getting this funded. Fiat Partners Foundation was instrumental in helping us financing the discussions and meetings and preparations for the application. And finally, we applied at the BMZ for this program, and then in collaboration with GITS FABI, and FABI is the Global Project Agri-Policy Advisory and Innovation Fund, we were able to initialize a phase of 25 candidates in the Adserv Academy that are supposed to start very soon. The stipend plus operational funds plus training will be financed. The idea stays the same. We have a tridem of the CG, the German universities, and the PhD candidate as originally envisaged. And they should do their research in a CGIAR++ project or program, because the additional operational funds are not sufficient to actually have a standalone research program, but it needs to be attached to something that is already in existence.
Please come to an end. Yeah?
It's the last slide.
Okay.
So we hope that we can start the whole thing in October 2020. And right now we are waiting for the final go from the GIZ contract department. And we hope that when we start all this, that we don't have to cope too much with COVID-19 restrictions, but we are quite positive about the start of this. So in the future, we may develop a second phase to fulfill the original goal of 100 PhDs linking German universities with the CG. And I thank you very much for your attention, and any comments are welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much, Volkert, and also Sarah. We are a bit behind schedule, so any questions you have, please raise them directly later on to Volkert Asch or Sarah Glatzler, or you can also visit the Adserv website for more information on that. And with that, we come to the last two presentations. These are examples of BMZ funded research projects. The first one is addressing climate change, and it will be presented by Nese Srinivasulu. He is head of Applied Functional Genomics Cluster of IRI, the International Rice Research Institute in the Philippines, based in the Philippines. And Nese, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Jürgen. So I'm just trying to share my screen. So let me see whether. Can you see the screen?
No, I see my, yeah, now. Okay, now you can start the presentation.
Perfect. So
please
first
try
of all,
to keep the time, yeah?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jürgen, for the invite to present our results on the climate resilience. So my name is Nese Srinivasulu. I do work here at IRI. I'm going to give a couple of examples in terms of research progress, what we made with the funding support from BMZ. So in this particular project, we are interested about developing heat-resilient varieties, which is suitable for South Asia as well as Southeast Asia, and in particularly minimizing the yield impact due to high night temperature conditions. So why this topic? Basically, changing climate and rising temperature is a threat to the sustainable rice production, and it is impacting in a big way in Asia as well as in Africa, and thereby it would have a substantial effect on ensuring global food security. So every single degree increase of night temperature would lead to 10% decline in the yield. And when we see the temperatures, both day temperature as well as night temperature have been increasing over the last few decades, but night temperature is very rapidly increasing in a dramatic way. So thereby, we have prioritized actually to study the impact of high night temperature and how it affects in the rice production areas and what kind of mitigating solutions we could bring in. Unfortunately, until today, there are no good breeding materials developed, mainly because there is no good system of phenotyping. And also, we do not really have any discovery in terms of genes or QTLs explaining high night temperature tolerance in terms of yield or yield stability. Just wanted to point out that looking at the last 30 years, impact of high night temperature in the rice producing areas have affected nearly 2.3 million tons of yield losses, with a value of loss of 800 million per year. So that's quite a big number in terms of impact what we are able to see with respect to night temperature. So a brief introduction that temperature effect could happen at any given stage of plant development. So we do have vegetative stage as well as reproductive stage. If stress happens during the vegetative stage, then tiller number would be affected. Thereby, it would affect yield. Whereas in the transition towards fertilization as well as during the seed development, if night temperature occurs, then we seems to have impact about reducing the grain number because of number of grains per panicle, and also it would impact grain filling duration, thereby grain quality would also be impacted. So on the lower side here, I've shown that there are three kinds of stress: high day temperature, high night temperature, combination of high day and high night. And there are regions where if it happens both during daytime as well as nighttime, the increase in temperature could really have a much more pronounced effect. But in this particular project, we have focused more on high night temperature impact, which is impacting both the tiller formation as well as with respect to grain number per panicle. So what did we do in this project is we have used actually a more holistic approach, which is an integrated approach of using GIS technology to identify basically the rice producing areas which are being impacted. Then we have developed actually the field trials in those hotspot regions. And then we have been investing about resequencing the resources of allied germplasm as well as the diversity panels. And then we have brought in actually a new phenotyping methodologies to screen those populations. And in order to have a quick solutions, what we did is like we have used those different donor lines and we have developed pre-breeding materials. We call it as magic lines. And these lines have been used actually to screen them under hotspot regions. And then we did identify the suitability of the tolerance of those lines. And in a way, this is an example from digitalizing the gene bank towards pre-breeding to address the climate resilience. And this is a kind of one-stop solution to mine the triads. So in terms of rice production areas, high night temperature is predominantly affecting South Asia, mostly in the Bangladesh as well as in the West Bengal region. And also we see that part of the Southeast Asia is affected and Myanmar is actually another country. And also part of the Africa is getting impacted. And these are really the region where rice is being produced. And we see that high night temperature is dramatically rising. And in this particular project, we have identified two target countries, that's Bangladesh and Myanmar. And when we have developed the GIS maps, what we have seen is basically ours is actually the season between April to July. It has, HNT has a very pragmatic effect on the rice production. And ours is actually one of the major season in Bangladesh. And when we looked into the last 37 years, nearly 83% of the area gets impacted because of the high night temperature. And the next season is actually the Boro season from December to April. Certain selected regions gets affected, whereas other regions are favorable, that's in blue. And the most favorable season would be the Amman from August to December. So we have actually mapped this information, and then we have actually decided to screen during the off season where there is a peak of high night temperature. And likewise in Myanmar, we have developed the maps for the two different seasons. As you could see, season 2 is the major rice producing season, and nearly 23% of those areas gets impacted, particularly in the central part of Myanmar. So we did identify several donor lines in the past. These are like Giza 178 and N22 as the heat tolerant lines. And then also we identified several cold tolerant lines. And then we picked some high quality line as well as high yielding line like IR72. And then we have created actually the magic population by increasing the recombination frequency using those 8 founder lines. We have fixed the populations, and these S6 derived fixed mapping populations have been screened in the hotspots. as well as under controlled conditions here at IRI. And the outputs, what we have done is we have looked for yield components as well as for yield, and then looking at the data coming from IRI as well as hotspots in Myanmar and Bangladesh, we calculated for the yield stability. And as you could see here, this is actually the yield tons per hectare. And based on the AMI, we calculated the stability, which is shown here. And as you could see on the left side, the locations what we have identified from Bangladesh and Myanmar, they are prone to high net temperature, leading to very low yield. Whereas when we have used under more favorable conditions, yield is high. Interestingly, from this population, we have identified some lines which are not only stable in its stability index for yield, but also they are high yielding. And this is exactly what we would be interested to not only develop the pre-breeding germplasm, but screen effectively using the latest technology and identify the lines. And then we have used actually sequencing approaches to basically genotype the population. And basically we did calculate one of the important QTLs on chromosome 8. And here are a combinations of haplotype with SNPs. Inferior haplotype, which gives a yield of ranging between 1.4 tons to 2 tons, whereas the superior haplotype, what we identify, gives an average between 4 to 4.5 tons. So there is a clearly 2-ton advantage what we have identified for this genetic region. And the superior QTL containing lines are found to be stable, and they do perform well under high net prone areas. And
there are 4 minutes left. Yeah.
All right. So in terms of physiological mechanisms, like we have identified that non-structural carbohydrate consumption in stem is going to be critical. They increase under high net temperature, and that has an inverse relationship with the yield. And we are proposing that in addition to screening for yield, this could be other alternative physiological mechanism. So thereby, from this, we have identified several genetic resources. The lines which have been highlighted in blue are the magic lines, and then we did identify some of the lines highlighted here in blue are high yielding. And then in addition, we have developed additional near isogenic lines which also do well under high net temperature. And then we went back to the maps what we have developed, and then we tried to identify those rice producing areas. And then we estimated if we continue to grow sensitive lines as checks. So I just wanted to point out that the ones red are the checks which are popular varieties grown right now. And you see that there is really a very minimum yield and a high net temperature compared to other tolerant varieties what we have identified. So this sensitive line clearly shows that there is a big yield loss, and the yield is just in the range between 1 ton to 2 tons, whereas the tolerant line what we have identified actually do well under hotspot areas. And then we did some ex-ante analysis by going through those districts and then linking if we would be successful in near future to release these tolerant varieties what we have identified in the target countries with the yield advantage, then we would clearly see that there would be around 1.2 million tons of yield advantage in Bangladesh. In Myanmar, it's going to be around 1.7 tons, totally leading to around 2.9 tons. And the value proposition would be nearly $296 million would be saved for Bangladesh. And then for Myanmar, around 348 million. So basically, this integrated approach clearly points out that there is an advantage to bring latest technology from pre-breeding all the way up to ex-ante analysis. And then we are able to identify important heat tolerant lines, particularly do well under high net temperature. And then we identified the QTLs, and we also defined some of the physiological markers which could be used in a future for screening. And then we have really linked the positive benefits of utilizing these tolerant lines for the target region. So with this, I would like to close my presentation by acknowledging the support of BMZ, and we clearly integrated the support of national partners from Myanmar as well as from Bangladesh, and also several colleagues, including several PhD students, have been trained during the project duration. So again, thank you for this opportunity. So if there would be any question, I would be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Nese. I think we catched up a little bit in time, but nevertheless, we still have one presentation to go. I think there were very interesting preliminary results of discovery research with a very high potential impact in the future. If participants have more questions, please raise them also directly to Nese. And then I come to our last presentation, and that will be presented by Solomé Gebris-Gaper, sorry, I always struggle with your name, from IMI, that's the International Water Management Institute, in collaboration with a couple of other partners. I'm sure you will mention that. And that is addressing the refugee crisis. Solomé, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Jürgen. I'm trying to connect or share my screen.
Yeah,
so
we can see it already. You just start.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will be presenting together with my colleague Mary Nijenga from ICRAF, the World Agroforestry Center, and also Ruth Mandam. She will not present, but she will come in if there are any questions related to her area of expertise. This presentation is based on the project which is funded by BMZ. The presentation is about gender-responsive circular economy solutions or innovations for food and energy security of refugee and host communities in East Africa. So I'll start with a brief background about refugee context, and then what the project is about, what we try to achieve, and Mary will come in with some of the challenges that we have identified and some of the solutions that we are proposing to the approaches that we are proposing for refugees, energy, and food security. So just to give you a little bit of background, refugees in East Africa, the East Africa hosts about 3.2 million refugees.
Solomé, sorry, I think you have to start the presentation. We just see PowerPoint open, but you need to start presentation, slideshow.
Yeah, at my end, it's slideshow.
No, not here. If you go on the bar on top, slideshow, and then start.
It's slideshow now. It's on my end. It's slideshow.
Well, we don't see the second slide or the third slide. We don't know where you are. We see just the front page.
Go to the second slide.
Yeah, I'm in the second slide. So probably my network is poor, so let me turn off my camera so that
it has nothing to do with the camera. Well, if it doesn't work, I can do it from my computer.
Yeah.
Let me see.
Jürgen,
Shall I
maybe
stop sharing?
Jürgen, maybe you do it from your computer.
Yeah, I try to do it. Can you see it? Not yet. Can you see it?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Okay.
Salome, I think you have to stop sharing your screen for Jürgen to be able to share his.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have done that.
Okay.
Okay, I go off and now I go in again.
Okay.
Now you should see it.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
coming.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so I can see. Yeah.
Just tell me when I should move.
Okay. Okay, we'll do so. So I was just to give you a bit of a background on refugee context in East Africa. The East Africa sub-region hosts about 3 million refugees and nearly 5.76 million internally displaced people. So when you look at the whole of Africa, the whole of Africa hosts about 6.3 million refugees, and of this, 50% of those refugees are hosted in the East Africa sub-region. Therefore, the three countries, Uganda, Ethiopia, and Kenya, are the largest refugee hosting nations in Africa. And when we look at the refugee status, the refugees are increasing exponentially, being more than 60% of them being female and 70% of them are children. And these refugees, or the influx of refugees, are increasing due to continued civil and political unrest in the neighboring countries, such as, for example, the South Sudan and DRC. A lot of people flee to Uganda, Ethiopia, and Kenya. Next slide, please. So the influx of refugees, there are a lot of, or a number of challenges facing the refugees. One of the key challenges is the competition for resources. These refugees are normally located in dry areas where there is pressure on land, soil, water, and wood energy. And this has resulted in competition for resources between the host community and the refugees. Resource degradation is another key challenge. We see increased soil fertility depletion, water shortage, and deforestation. Another key challenge is the gender-specific challenge, especially in light of wood energy. Women are traveling long distances for the search of wood fuel, and this has exposed them to different gender-based violences. Therefore, we believe, or we think, that the circular economy approach could be one of these solutions to contribute to addressing some of these challenges, because circular economy links sanitation, waste management, and resource or natural resource management by providing energy and nutrient solutions for this kind of contexts. Next slide, please. So coming to our project, as I have mentioned in the first, in my introduction, the project is funded by BMZ. It's called Resource Recovery and Reuse in Refugee Settlements in Africa. And the objective of this project is to pilot and scale up locally viable and gender-responsive circular economy solutions for refugees and host community settlements. And we work in 3 countries, are the 3 largest hosting countries, refugee hosting countries: Ethiopia, Kenya, and Uganda. So the figures that you see on the right are the 6 refugees settlements that we work in. So if you look at Ethiopia, we work in Kule and Turkey, where there are both these refugees are very big and they host more than 100,000 refugees, and the same in Kenya and Uganda. So the focus of our project is, or what we focus on, is on recovery of energy and water and nutrients by using the resources available in the refugee settlements, that is waste-based or resource recovery solutions. And also gender is a key aspect of the project. We envision that we will develop gender-responsive solutions for resilient refugee settings. The project is simulation and capacity development. The plan is, or the idea is to directly train about 3,600 refugees on circular economy solutions, such as biomass to energy or nutrient recovery or wastewater reuse for kitchen gardens and so on. So we train or develop capacities of refugees and host communities, we also plan to pilot some of our solutions. That is, we identify early adapters, or we call them champions, where we can showcase by piloting some of our solutions. Then the thing is on gender integration, which Mary, my colleague, will be talking about. Mary, over to you.
Thank you so much. In respect to gender integration, what we are doing is that we have taken gender as one of the disciplines within the project, and we have a gender researcher supported from Penn State University, and we have already developed a strategy to integrate gender throughout the project cycle. And the way this project was conceived is that in the design part of it, we looked at the challenges, and we found that there is really a lot of need to integrate gender. And so we are integrating gender in the whole project cycle, all the way from the design, context analysis, trying to understand what are the challenges, what are the opportunities, and in the implementation part of it, prioritization of the interventions. And when we are carrying out capacity building, as well as communication and impact assessment. And that's why we have a gender scientist to do this. The challenges that we are addressing in these refugee settlements and host communities is 3 main challenges. And these 3 main challenges were identified through a very consultative process, where we also worked with stakeholders who are already working in these areas, and also the communities. And one of the key problems is cooking energy. It is such a big problem that these people, the food aid that they receive, they use it as a currency. They sell it to be able to access food or exchange it. And the other thing is hunger. The food relief that these people receive is not enough, and even the dietary diversity is not adequate, and therefore there is a lot of malnutrition as documented. And the third challenge is land degradation. These refugees, once they settle in these dry areas, they are harvesting firewood, construction materials, and this has been resulting into conflict with the host community. Next slide. Good. Okay. And then the solutions that we are working on, this is resource recovery and reuse, is twofold. Some of them are really addressing the cooking energy problem and enhancing environmental sustainability, and looking at sustainable biomass harvesting, for example, conversion of any organic residues into cooking energy, and integrating agroforestry and efficient use of the biomass. energy. And the second part is that the solutions are looking into food and nutrition security, home gardening, because there is very little space in these places, and so they are doing home gardening with culturally important food types, because there is high diversity of people coming from different cultural backgrounds, and which crops work for who. And then we are looking into how they can use grey water from their households as irrigation water, organic material for biofertilizer, and organic material for biochar for soil improvement. And those solutions are the solutions that the CGIAR has been working on, and so we are putting them into the ground for adaptation. And just to say, these components are looking, the circular economy solutions is really a game changer. These are limited resource areas, and therefore every single resource that is there needs to be recycled. And this recycling so that we can have local food and energy systems, and circular economy is a game changer. And we have mentioned gender integration is key to look at the people's needs, aspirations, the opportunities, cultural diversity, and capacity building, transferring the skills to the community so that they can build resilient livelihoods. And that knowledge is what will do a lot of capacity building. And then the scaling up, working with the partners, especially UN bodies, UN Habitat, UNHCR, so that there is long-term sustainability. And I leave Solomi to conclude with talking about the partners in the project. Over to you, Solomi.
There's 3 minutes left, please.
Yeah, this is the last slide. So the project partners, we have key project partners here for coordination and technical advice, the CGIAR, as Mary mentioned. We have worked a lot on circular economy and on other aspects. So IMI is leading this project together with ICRAF. CIAT is also part of the project, where they look at the improving soil fertility and land conservation. In terms of capacity building and pilot implementation, of course, we have to have the local organizations directly working on the ground in the refugee camps. So in Ethiopia, we are partnering with ADRA, and in Kenya and Uganda, we are partnering with Danish Refugee Council. These two will be in charge of capacity development, piloting, and also the outreach. And technical backstopping, we have a gender expert from Penn State University. We also have from Wollo University in Ethiopia, somebody who coordinates the project activities. And we also have an urban agriculture expert who will be working in the capacity building for home gardening. And for upscaling and stakeholder dialogue, we engage with international humanitarian and donor community so that the solutions that we propose is integrated in the design of their strategy for the refugees. Next slide. I think this is the last slide. If you want more information about the project, we have a project website. We also have produced a project brief, which we can share with you if you are if you want more information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You really kept the time very well. If there's still maybe one question, we have 1 minute to go. Hannah, do you have one? Hannah?
Yes, so sorry. There is one question, but I think it relates more to the presentation from Iri. It's about promoting climate smart agriculture, but rather that we should call it smart agriculture. I wonder if maybe even both groups could respond.
Okay, maybe we stop here. I think we just leave this question as it is. We are almost through. I'm not sure if we are not cut on the YouTube channel at exactly 12 o'clock. I thank you very much for all the presenters of this BMZ GIZ session. I think it was a very broad mix. Yes? Okay. So I just hear that we can continue a few moments. So if we have a few more questions, maybe we can allow that and let it answered by the presenters. Hannah, maybe back to you.
Well, the climate smarts question was from me. It was more a comment than anything else.
A question. Okay, then maybe you can, if you have any other questions on these last two presentations or also on the one of Adserv. Do you see something, Hannah? No.
There's no further. There is one question for Adserv regarding access to the ASINA program. Is this only for German citizens or master students that studied at a German university?
Yeah, I saw this question already. It's actually maybe because of the shortness of time, it was a bit confusing, but of course it's not limited to German citizens or German masters. The people need to be eligible for acceptance in a German PhD program at a German university. Nationality and where they did their masters doesn't matter at all.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Hannah, any other questions coming up?
There was one more question regarding the distribution across German universities getting support of the junior scientist program.
Yes.
I can answer that quickly. We had students enrolled in the University of Hohenheim, Bayreuth, Göttingen, Berlin, and Munich so far.
Okay.
Okay, fine. So if we don't have more burning questions, I think feel free to get in contact directly to the presenters during this Tropentag. I think this time it's much easier with the WOVA app. And then you can get all the information you basically need. There are also a couple of websites which were presented already where you get more details about these various presentations. So I will close this session now by saying, well, thank you very much for all the presenters. I think we had a quite diverse program, starting with the overall strategy, giving us a big picture from BMZ side. Then we saw also the various instruments, for example, the SIM integrated experts which are working at the various centers. Then the support of the early career program implemented by Adserv and various universities. And then finally, we had two examples of BMZ-funded research projects, one addressing the climate crisis and another one, the refugee crisis. So thank you very much, and I hope you enjoyed it, and please enjoy also the other Tropentag sessions, and goodbye, and see you maybe next year. Thank you.
Bye-bye, thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.